Before we watched TV shows and movies on Narcos, and even before Pablo Escobar's rise to fame, there was one man who was the ultimate narco. He lived the narco life of greed, money, and power, but found a way to reclaim his life and use his astonishing experiences to empower others to live a life of hope, meaning, and redemption. Welcome to the Narco Mindset Podcast, where Dr. Jorge Valdes shares his journey through life before and after the Medellin drug cartel, from torture and multiple prison sentences to how he refocused his life onto a path of principles learned as a narco. It's time to share that raw truth with you, right here on the Narco Mindset Podcast, with your host, Dr. Jorge Valdes.
Welcome to the Narco Mindset Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Jorge Valdes, today with my co-host, Anthony Petrucci. Anthony, we finished the last episode with my airplane crash over the jungles of Panama. Believing that nothing could happen to me, here was this young kid who had a huge future, suddenly not caring about anything. Couldn't care less about people, friends, family. Nothing mattered. You know what? It's funny in life, it's very easy to lose perspective of things. You know, we have ways of justifying all of our actions that are convenient to our behavior. We never think about those consequences that are sure to come. You can clearly see it in today's society. Human beings have become very selfish. And what is the byproduct of a selfish person? I tell people a lot of times when I go and speak at a prison, inmates, criminals are selfish people. They really don't care about anybody or anything. All they care is about themselves. And money has become my God, to the point that when we crashed, I remember Harold telling me, take the flare gun. First of all, we thought we were dead. And when we realized we're not dead, he said, take the flare gun and just blow it up. Blow the plane up. I looked at him and said, bullshit. There's 1.8 million reasons why I can't blow that airplane up. We get out of the airplane, the police come. I knew in Latin America with money we buy everything, but the plane dove, so there was no way. We jumped out of the door, so there's no way for anyone to just walk into the airplane, check and see. So I said, listen, we're looking at some banana plantations, and we had this crash landing. And because it was a crash landing, didn't suspect anything. I said, can you take us to a hotel so I can make some phone calls to get someone to come fix the plane tomorrow? And I'll go to Costa Rica where we were supposed to be going. See, we had financed the campaign of the president of Costa Rica at that time, so I knew I'd be safe there. But the truth of the matter, all I needed to have done is come clean with that police officer in that little town, giving him $10,000, and we would have been scot-free. He said, all right, let me take your passports and I'll get them stamped. I should have realized that meant he had to call Panama City. It wasn't in his office, he was going to stamp them. We made arrangements to have someone come and pick us up. We said, screw the airplane. Once we get the drugs out of it, we'll blow the airplane up and we'll head to Costa Rica, which was only about 30 minutes away. They had arranged everything at the border. Someone would be waiting for us, and we were going to be scot-free. So we went to sleep that night, woke up the next morning, went to a police station to pick up our passports, and the gentleman, the head of the police station there, says, can you follow me into this room? And when I went into the room, I just knew that it was over. There was something gut inside of me that told me something was wrong. He told me, wait in here, and thank God I had enough premonition to take 3 $100 bills and put them in my gums. I said, if something happens, I'm going to need this money. Then I'm going to find the money because I had a false bottom on my suitcase. About 10 minutes later, they came, they took our shirts off, and they put us in front of all the cocaine. It was a big table, and there was a U.S. consul, the head of the DEA in Panama, and the head of the G2 for the country of Panama. I knew that it was all over with. I said, I need to talk to an attorney. One of the guards just slapped me in the face and said, you're in Panama. This is Napoleonic law. You're guilty till you find yourself innocent. They take us to a cell, and the following day comes the attorney general. I walked up to him and I said, sir, I don't want to waste your time or mine. I need to ask you 2 questions. Number 1, how much to buy the cocaine back? And number 2, how much money to get out of here? He looked at me and started laughing and says, Noriega sold the cocaine, but $150,000 for you, $200,000 for the other 3. It was 2 pilots, Harold and myself. I said, done, not a problem. You have the $250,000 here. Take this number, call them, give them this code, and you have the money here the next day. Sure enough, next day the money came. He went ahead, took it, and the day after he came to see us. And he said, I'm going to transfer you to the city of Panama. I'm going to drop the case, tell them that it was an accident, that you didn't know what was inside the airplane. You thought that you were dealing guns with the Sandinistas. We have no jurisdiction over you, so I'm going to let you go. But we'll take you inside the office of the DEA, and they're going to interrogate you, and you just got to keep to your story that I'm telling you, and the next day you're going to go home to Costa Rica. So I'm like, perfect, not a problem. I go back to the cell and tell my guys, hey, guys, I worked out a deal. And the mistake I made was I told them that I had just bribed the Attorney General. I said, look, they're going to take us to the city of Panama. They're going to rough us up. Stick to your story. We'll go home the next day. Sure enough, 3 days later they come. They put us in an airplane. They took us to Panama City and took us to the G2 head offices. And there was the DEA. And they lined us up against the wall. And all of a sudden, they open up our door. And they bring in this kid, literally naked, probably weigh about 80, 90 pounds, 5'2", handcuffed to his hands and his feet. They throw him on the floor face down, enter the broom right in his rectum. I mean, blood splattered all over the place. It was the most disgusting thing you could ever imagine. And he passed out. I don't know if they killed him or not, but they dragged him out, blood all over the floor. And head of the G2 comes right next to me and said, big boy, we only caught him with 30 pounds of marijuana. Imagine you with more than 100 kilos of cocaine. I looked at him and said, listen, I don't know anything about that cocaine, and I don't give a shit what that kid did. My case is different. Still thinking, we're going to stick to the story, we're going to go home. Then the pilot breaks weak. Big old 6'5" George pilot, he starts crying. And he's like, no, yeah, I'll tell the truth. Once I heard that, it was over with. They took the two pilots into another room. We never saw them again. The worst part was, not that he told them that I was a drug dealer. What really made things worse was that he told them I had bribed the Attorney General. So the only guy that could save me now was in hot water. They took us to a dungeon, and for the next 20-some-odd days, completely naked, handcuffed to feet and arms, they beat us 2 and 3 times a day till we would pass out. No food. The only water was some water that would drip out of a pipe in the ceiling, and it was dirty, had bugs. The floor was just filthy with nothing but blood and shit and piss all over it. We tried to pass out underneath the water because we never knew when they were going to open the water, and that was the only thing that we would get. One time they came in and they said they were going to set us on fire, and instead of setting us on fire, they took a cattle prod, applied it to my testicles, and I don't know how high I jumped, but somewhere up there in that distance, I passed out. And I remember I had a vision. One of those times that I was out, and the vision was that I was shaving, and my son, who at this time in my vision was like 7 years old, in reality he was 6 months old, was coming up to me, he was crying. And I'm like, Georgie, why are you crying? And he said, Dad, because all my friends say that my father is not a man. I started weeping in my state of subconscious, and I said that day, I'm going to die in this fucking prison, but I'll be damned if I'm going to let these people break me. I'm going to do everything I can for them to kill me, but they're not going to break me. And you know, the mental torture is worse than the physical torture. Your body gets to a point where it doesn't take any more pain. Eventually, I threatened one of the guys to tell Noriega that if he didn't kill me, I was going to rape his family right in front of him and his wife and kids and just a bunch of horrors. I want to do whatever I could to reach someone to that tipping point where they would just go ahead and say, screw you, and kill me. Well, Noriega came 3 days later, and he looked at me and said, why are you mad at me? I'm not the one that told on you. It was your pilot. I had nothing to say, and he looked at me and said, look, you paid the wrong guy. $250,000, and now you will be out of here tomorrow, or the day after I get the money. Again, we went through the same routine. 3 days later, he got his $250,000. The next day, true to his word, he picked us up, took us to the airport, and here we're sitting waiting for a flight to Costa Rica when all of a sudden about 30 Interpol agents picked us up like a sack of potatoes and threw us on an airplane headed to Miami. We landed into Miami, went in front of the judge, and I was charged with heading the largest drug conspiracy in the history of America, responsible for over 95% of all the cocaine that came into America, and given the highest bond ever in America. Originally, they wanted $7 million, and they settled on $2 million. I was just 23 years old. I just turned 23, February 28th, and this was April 29th. You know, I went to trial, hired the best lawyers that money could buy. I went into trial. They ended up kidnapping the captain of the Bolivian Air Force. They brought him to the United States. When we went in trial, I spent over $2 million in the best lawyers money could buy. The government offered me a deal for 2 years. I turned that down. I mean, I could have gone home at that time, but I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to plead guilty. I got these people beat. When Miami could not turn an indictment, they took me to the Middle District of Georgia and united me to the indictment that Harold, who was a fugitive and had left 4 years earlier, had pending. I'd never been to Macon in my life. Didn't even know where the hell Macon was. So anyway, how can they do that? The best attorneys that money could buy say, hey, don't worry, we have a venue, which is a constitutional right that you have to be tried in the district where you committed your offenses. We're going to go in there and tell them you're a drug dealer, but they don't have a right to try here. On the other hand, I hired this attorney who would become my lawyer forever, Alan Ross, to represent the captain of the Bolivian Air Force. He plays the poor little me with the wife crying and all of that deal. Well, the long story is that finally, after 6 weeks of trial, the jury turns a verdict. Dr Valdes guilty on all counts. Oscar Nunez innocent. And I'm like, what? If this son of a bitch didn't sell anything, what did I buy? I mean, you're accusing him of selling me the cocaine that was in that airplane. If he didn't sell it, I couldn't have bought it. I went to Tallahassee. And in Tallahassee, which they call the Gladiator School, I stayed there for probably about 2 years. Eventually, we paid the designating officer, and they transferred me to Eglin Air Force Base. I remember the warden the day I got to Eglin Air Force Base, and he looked at me and he's like, I don't know who the fuck you paid, but you don't belong here, and I'm going to make sure I get you out of here soon. I was like, sir, I didn't pay anyone because I'm sure the federal officials don't take bribes. I mean, little did he know that I had people bribed all the way up to the highest level of the United States government. Here's the thing. Money corrupts. Absolute money corrupts absolutely. At one time, we were spending over $1 million a month in bribery. Prison didn't change me. When I went up to prison, I thought I had a great time. I had people that were there work for me. I had a blast. Eventually, I ended up meeting this girl that I decided that, you know what? She's beautiful. We can have a good time. And I was working at that time in the base. So I invited her to come meet me the first day that I was at the detail in charge of the general's court. Well, we kept the equipment. I ended up making a nice little office, bought a sofa and a couch. And I was having a blast in prison. I'd get up early in the morning and go out there and get a big military truck and just go around the prison. I meet my girlfriend sometimes at different places. I hated God at this time, and I was such an atheist that I figured that the best place that I could meet her where no one would suspect was at the chapel. So at the chapel, behind the altar, is where we would meet once a week and have sex. Did I have any remorse? Absolutely none. Eventually, I bribed the officer at Eglin, and I bought him a brand new big screen Sony TV, and he gave me a sticker like I was a family member of a general. And I bought a brand new convertible van, and my wife would come and pick me up every morning at 8 o'clock and take me. I bought an apartment 5 miles from the base, and I'd go out there, and I spend the whole day till lunchtime when she would bring me back. And I would go back in for lunch. And then in the afternoon, I just go around the base just having a good time. No remorse, no nothing. And when I got out, I went back to the same thing that I started all over again. See, when I had left, I had given all operations to Sal and Willie. In exchange, they were supposed to save some money for me. Well, the long of the story was that when I got out, there was no money. So, and to me, it was fine. It was the biggest favor they ever did to me because I ended up going on my own and not being with them and paying for the consequences of some of the stuff that they've gone through. And, and they're great people. I have great respect. They told me that they quit when I quit. And you know what? I'm going to believe that. Because if I don't believe that they quit when I quit, then what I have to believe was that they betrayed me. And if I believe that they betrayed me, I would just think they're the sorriest human beings that ever walked the earth. They went their way, I went my way. Went back to the same thing, just as miserable as before. Within no time at all, I was bringing in 500-600 kilos. I had met a guy in prison that was visiting another inmate there. I liked the guy a lot. And when I came out, we called him the Arab because he looked like an Arab, even though he was from Honduras. His name was Junior. And I said, look, Junior, you can handle everything for me. I'll make you equal partners, but I can't be around the drugs because I'm under parole. One day, something happened. I was just starting to really feel miserable because I remember going to my mom's house. Finally, my mother found out one day when she walked in there and she saw, literally stacks of cash all the way up to just about almost the ceiling. Before I got arrested, she thought that I was just nothing but a businessman. But when she saw that, she left the house, didn't talk to my father for a couple of weeks, finally came back, looked at me and said, son, what do you do? Doesn't please God. Well, you're my son. She cooked me my favorite meal, and I thought things went back to normal. She went through the horrors of that trial, going in there and hearing the media and the prosecutor say the most horrific things about her son. Never once did she ever tell me, why or why did you do this to me? Even though all she would say, son, if you go back to jail again, you're going to kill us. I went to prison. My brother sacrificed his whole life for me. All those years I was in prison, he never missed bringing my parents to the visiting room. I used to think my brother was a loser because I wanted him to get involved, but he didn't want nothing to do with it. And I'm like, he's scared and I can't believe it. We're, came from the same mother and same father. It would take me years to realize that my brother was a genius. See, money did not drive him. Family drove him. When money became my God, when money began to drive me, family meant nothing. And I ended up really abandoning my brother, who I loved to death. The brother grew up sharing the same tears, in the same bed, in the same pain. The brother who was always there for me. The brother never missed one single visit to bring my parents. I ended up abandoning him. I remember him sending me a song, I Miss the Lonely Years. I hear that song still today. We went around, just did not see what really meant things. I looked back today and my brother was also my giant. My father and my brother were my heroes. He sacrificed his life for me. And I asked myself, would I do that for him? Would I have done that for him? I know I would today, but I don't know if I would have done it back then, to be honest. Things kept going. One day, I was supposed to go to California like I always went. And then that day, I remember I got to the airport, I had always had breakfast in the plane waiting for me. And when I went to step into the airplane, I started to throw up. And I don't know why. I didn't eat anything. I just drank water and a juice. I was feeling great. I started to throw up, and suddenly I had diarrhea. So I ran into my office in the hangar of the airport. It was coming out both ends faster than I could figure it out. It went on for 15, 20 minutes. When I thought I would just, that was it. I let it all out. There was nothing else to let out. I washed my face. I brushed my teeth. I went back to the airplane. And sure enough, when I went to take the first step, the same thing happened again. So this time I told Eddie, listen, Eddie, I can't go, man. You go, and you tell him I'll be there next week. But if I go there, I'm going to throw up all over that airplane. Eddie looked at me, gave me a kiss, said, don't worry, boss, I'll go. I would never see him again. I never see him again because there was a contract on my life. They were waiting for me to get there, and instead of me, it was Eddie, and they killed him. I remember being at the funeral, and his little daughter looking at me. I had baptized her 6 months earlier. And she looked at me and she said, Godfather, my daddy went to be with Jesus. And I looked at her, and it was the first time since I left Cuba that a tear came out of my eyes. Not even when I was laying in the floor of that Panama jail being beat to death. And I said to myself that day, you know what? There's no Jesus. And if there is, if we get up there, he doesn't want us up there. We're so bad that he's going to look at us and say, hey, good for you, stay down there. But more important, when with my little daughter, it was everything in my life, my crystal. Was a year old by that time. Would look at somebody else and say, Daddy went to be with Jesus, and I would never see her again. All of a sudden I realized that every day that I left my house, I remember thinking to myself, kiss my kids, and knowing that, you know what, this is the last day that I'm coming home. Every day I woke up, there was a contract on my life. Such and such put a contract on your life. Hey, George, such and such. And you know what? And I remember many times when I thought that the person that they were naming was pretty serious. I remember calling Manuel and asking permission so I could take them out. And I'm like, Manuel. And he's like, nope. He said, son, we can make $1 million anytime we want. We just cannot bring our life back. I said, Manuel, it's not about making $1 million. This son of a bitch wants to kill me, and I can take him out quick. I got 100 times more power than he does. And he's like, nope. If you're honest, and if you're a man of integrity, God will take care of you. I said, Manuel, we're fucking drug dealers, man. God doesn't take care of drug dealers. And by the way, I don't believe there's a God. Let me take care of it. He refused. And it wasn't that I was a killer. It was just the fact that, listen, someone wants to kill me, and self-preservation told me I can take him out. But I thank God that I never crossed that one line, because I know that some of the people that did, they're just not around to tell about it. I remember there was this guy also, a friend of mine named Lázaro, that he used to be an old pot smuggler. And at this time, I owned the best quarter horse in the world. And I was starting to breed horses, and I wanted to become the best ranch in the country. I started to turn all of my ranch into orange groves. I started to open up businesses because I was like, I'm not going to stay in this long. So I started to open up business. I started making, millions of dollars. So I remember Lázaro coming. I'm like, Lázaro, how'd you get out? He had 10 mares that he would bring every year to breed to my horse. And he looked at me and he's like, hey, George, you know what? It's like being pregnant, son. He said, you're either pregnant or you're not. You're either in or you're out. And I laughed and I brushed it off and I went on. 2 months later, the third moment in my life, the third cataclysmic moment in my life would occur. Whenever I had my daughter, I would never have anybody around me. She was already with me the week before. So this weekend I had no visit. I was living in this enormous mansion. So I was partying and I had some movie stars with me. It was about 11 o'clock at night and I get a call from the gate and there's a guard and he's like, hey, your daughter's at the gate. Your ex-wife dropped her off. And I'm like, I'm not even supposed to see her this weekend. Well, lo and behold, I tell the guards, bring her over to the house. And I tell the nanny that used to take care of her, I said, make sure she doesn't get out of her room. And she went to her room. She was asleep. And I said, I'll have breakfast with her in the morning. And I went back to my party. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, I still would bet $1 million to anyone that could get within 100 feet of me, within 10 feet of me. She starts knocking in my door. And it would shock me. And suddenly, like, Daddy, Crystal. And I'm like, this is my baby girl. She's out there knocking and crying, trying to get in the room with me because she slept with me. And I couldn't open the door. I felt filthy. For the first time in my life, I felt filthy. I felt corrupt. And I told the girls that were in the room, I said, go out the window. And they left out the window. I went in the shower to wash off the filth off of me. And then I went into bed and I was shaking. And when I thought that she had gone to bed, I opened the door and she was by the floor. She was crying. And I said to myself, what the hell has my life happened? I picked her up. I hugged her. I brought her into bed with me. And I said, this day my life would change. See, I didn't know how to change. I didn't know what change meant. But I knew this. man, if I'm going north, I'm going to go south. If I'm going east, I'm going to go west. The first thing I could remember was calling my mother and telling my mother, I'm finished. I remember my mother talking over to my father and saying, Bebo, Jesus answered my prayers. And I'm like, what Jesus? It ain't about Jesus, Mom. It's Crystal. And then I hung up the phone. You see, I knew that the moment I told him that I was out, I probably had less than 6 months to live. We didn't have a very good retirement plan in the cartel. So I remember calling Manny and telling him, listen, in our code, that I was done. And I remember him saying, go with God, son. He also retired the day I retired. You know, I went ahead, realizing that my desperation and that emptiness for meaning and that hunger to be somebody, to be happy, to be content was so big. And the fact that I could not understand it. I had everything society told me would make me happy. I had $1 million worth of cars. I lived in a $20 million ranch. I had $1 million beach home, $1 million ski home, yachts, jets. I had everything a man could want. I was young. I had gorgeous women around me all the time. What else is there to life? Little did I realize later on that I would find meaning, but it would be a long, long time. So I walked away that day, changed my life completely. At this time now, I could not go out of my house very much because I couldn't afford the $30,000, $40,000 in security that I was paying. I moved out of Miami and moved into my ranch, and I left Miami, the city that I thought the sun would rise and fall, the city that I love more than anything in this world. I didn't go back for years because I realized one thing. Change has to be drastic, and unfortunately, it has to be painful. I knew one thing. If I kept where I was going, it was nothing but more and more destruction. There was nothing else I could acquire. I decided to hire this guy to teach me karate because I'd done karate as a young man, and I built this beautiful karate studio at the ranch. And I remember the first time he comes. He looks at me and he says, young man, I'm going to teach you about the sword. Man, was I happy. You know, I was 32 years old at that time. You know, I was just full of life, and I was like, man, I love weapons, and here comes this guy, and he's going to teach me about the sword. Well, lo and behold, I'm put on my uniform, and when I turn around, he's got a Bible in his hands. And I'm like, dude, first of all, I don't believe in the fucking book. I don't believe in God. Number two, I'm paying you a lot of money to teach me karate. So you take that sword home and bring the real sword tomorrow. Well, it was the first man in many, many years in my life that had the guts to come up to me where I could smell his breath and say, young man, what I got to give you, you got no money to pay. Well, let me tell you something. Out of instinct, I reached for the back of my pants. I realized I didn't have a gun. Again, remember, I told you I was an accountant. I was a very logical guy. I'm like, this guy's a 7th-degree black belt. He's going to begin to introduce Jesus by kicking his ass into me. And I'm like, no, hold on, buddy. Don't get excited. Look, I got a steam room. After our lesson, it takes for about 10 minutes for the steam room to heat up. If you want to, you can read to me. Waste your time. But I'm going to tell you something. It means nothing to me. And he did for years. He did that for 3 years. And there's got to be something wrong to this guy. He introduces me to his wife, and they've been married for 25 years, and she's 40 years old and Japanese. And when he tells me how beautiful she is, you know, I'm thinking that, wow, what a gorgeous Oriental, man. This woman's got to be like a knockout because I don't talk that way about my supermodels, and they are supermodels. And I remember when I met her, I'm like, man, this son of a bitch is sick. This woman is nothing. I mean, now I look at her, she's just a gorgeous woman. But then, see, in life, it doesn't matter how you look at life. What's important for you to tell yourself, what lenses am I looking at things through? Back then, I was looking at women, people, through the lens of materialism, through the lens of society. You're gorgeous, you must satisfy me. If you're not, you can't. Over 20, you're a has-been. So, you know, it was all screwed up. And I'm like, how can this guy be happy? He kept coming constantly for 3 years. And people always ask me, you know, hey, what did that dude say to change your life? And I'm saying, I'll be honest with you. I said, not a damn thing, because the truth of the matter was that every time he was preaching to me, I was getting over the ass whooping he had just given me for 2 hours that I didn't even have time to think about it. I said, but I'll tell you what, he changed me. It was everything that he did. The world that he lived in, so little with nothing, full of happiness and joy. And I kept asking him, you know, 3 years, we had a great relationship. Tim, really, be honest with me. What makes you happy? The only thing that he would tell me was, you know, George, the source of my joy, that I have an intimate relationship with this guy named Jesus. And that was so weird to me, because I was like, I mean, how can he have a relationship with someone that we don't know if he was real or not? You know, I mean, I can't have a relationship with thousands of people around me. And this guy's talking about he has a relationship with this fictional character. And he kept on and he kept on. And it was intriguing to me. It was just recently, and this is 40, we talk about back in 1988, 89, 90. We talk about 30 years ago. I look at it and I realize, you know what? He never asked me to convert. He never asked me to give my life to Christ or go to church with him. And I realized that, that's what my life is really all about. I make no beefs about it. I'm not a Christian speaker or author. I am an author. I am a speaker that is a very, very committed Christian. What I write is not intended, or what I say, or what this podcast is going to be, is not intended to convert anyone, to save anyone. I'm not your savior. I am not your God. I didn't die for you, so I can't save you and I can't convert you. All I am to do is to tell my story, my life. Well, my story has an intricate part of a Jesus that would change me and radically transform me. But I'm not here to tell you that's what you got to do. I'm just here to say, let me just share with you my story. And and sometimes the shoe fits, wear it. If not, just get another damn pair of shoes. Well, he preached to me. And July 1st, 1990, my divorce from my ex-wife was final. She's dragging my baby girl out of the ranch. I'm sitting there, I'm just devastated. My world's just coming crushing to an end. I couldn't give a shit if someone just killed me at that moment. And I ran into my room, and I remember exactly the words that morning. I got on my knees, and I said, Jesus, I don't know if you're real or not. And if you are, you probably look at me and say, George, you're so freaking bad, I want you up here. I said, but if you are, I want what Tim has got. And whatever he's got, my money can buy. My money can buy anything. Change me or kill me. Christians said that, hey, when you give your life to Christ, bells sound in heaven and stuff like that. Well, they must not sound for Cubans. I didn't hear a damn thing. Suddenly, I just did realize that I was becoming conscious of things. I didn't have a conscience before. I could see someone being cut to pieces and didn't give a damn. I would say, hey, you know what? He don't deserve to breathe the air that we breathe. Because it's the world that we live in. We don't give a shit about anybody. One of the things that we did in the cartel, see, we were supposed to be the bad guys, and we were. But guess what, man? The bad guys built houses for poor people. The bad guys helped anyone that was in need. We live in a world today, we don't do shit for anybody. If somebody can do something for us, we ain't going to do that for them. So I asked myself, who was the bad guy? Was Pablo Escobar the bad guy? He built, and we all built, but he had 500,000 houses, built hospitals, soccer fields. Yeah, he did horrible things. He was a murderer, and it's unforgivable what he's done. And by no means do I ever say that he was a good guy. But what I do say is that to those people that he fed, he was God. It's like, I'm anti-abortion. I'm not here to judge anybody. I tell people I am pro-life, but I'm pro-all life. I'm not pro an unborn baby. I'm pro that immigrant woman that has to cross rivers to come to America so she can give an opportunity to her family. I'm pro that woman feels that the only choice to her problem, the only answer to the problem because she's pregnant is to commit an abortion. I don't want to be her. I don't want to put myself in her shoes. I just pray that there'd be people there that will say, no, listen, there's a better way out. I'm pro those orphans. I'm pro those homeless kids in America, the richest country in the world. I'm pro those 1 out of 5 children that go hungry in the country where we are all suffering from tremendous obesity. How hypocritical are we? We're pro-life, but we're also pro the death sentence. And I had a friend, I said, a tooth for a tooth and an eye for an eye. I said, listen, I don't hear that shit. Because that same verses also say don't eat pork. I'm a Cuban, I gotta eat pork. But I just go by what this crazy Jew walking around the streets of Jerusalem said, hey, only I give life, only I take life. See, this is the problem why a lot of people don't like us Christians. Because we just don't walk the walk and talk the talk. We're good at talking. And I'm not talking about all this. I have amazing friends that are godly people. But I guarantee you that most people that have a problem with Christians don't have a problem with Jesus. They have a problem with Christians. Gandhi said, Jesus I love, Christians I have a hard time with. We are the only Bible someone might ever see. How are we to live our lives? We tell our children that God is Father, and then we show them the shittiest father in the world. 60% of our children are growing up without a father, a mother, struggling with 2 jobs, can't help but abandoning her child. It's a vicious cycle. We're so good at judging others, but we're so bad about being honest, transparent, and coming clean. That day, I decided I was going to change my life drastically. 3 months later, I was at a horse show in Springfield, Illinois, and I saw this federal agent come up to me early in the morning. My horse had won the class, and he's like, are you George Valdes? I'm like, who's asking? And he's like, you're under arrest, U.S. Marshals. I was like, what the heck? I haven't done anything in almost 4 years. I couldn't understand what was going on. I thought it was some father of this girl that I had dated, and the father was really pissed off at me because she moved in with me. And I'm like, man, he made some shit up, and they're picking me up for that. Took me to jail in Springfield, Illinois. And the next morning, they transferred me to Mobile, Alabama. And when I got to Mobile, Alabama, my attorney, Alan Ross, was waiting for me. And he says to me, George, I got great news for you. You're going to walk. I'm like, I'm going to walk? He said, yeah. He says, you won't believe this. The government has very little evidence. The main witness against you just killed himself in an airplane using a DEA airplane while he was smuggling drugs. I don't know if that was true or not, but that was what he said to me. But I remember looking at him and telling him the hardest thing I ever said. Alan, you won't believe what I'm about to tell you. You see, Alan, I can't go in there and plead innocent. He said, George, if you plead guilty, they're going to give you a life sentence. I'm like, a life sentence? He said, yeah. He said, right after you got out, the law changed. When you were in the business, the most they could give you is 15. But guess what, son? Now it's life. And the people that you were dealing with kept on dealing. And in a continual criminal enterprise, you're just as guilty as the least person in the conspiracy. I said, Alan, here's the deal. You won't understand this. I've given my life to another Jew. And that Jew, I don't hear from him. He ain't telling me shit. And here you are, a good Jew, and you tell me I'm going home. But I'm going to tell you something. If that Jew over there doesn't change me and gives me a new life, I don't give a damn where I die. Because I've been walking around life dead for years. He said, you want to go and come clean? I said, yes. You know, I knew deep inside I didn't have to testify against no one. All statute of limitations had run out. I said, look, I got to come clean with the government, with God, with my parents, and my children. It's the only way that I can start anew. Anthony, so many nights I wonder, why did people want to be like me? Yes, I had all the power, money, women, everything that a man would ever dreamed of, everything that I thought would really make me happy. You know, but deep down inside, when I looked at myself in the mirror every morning, you know, I was a miserable human being. I just could not understand it. I had worked so hard. I had sacrificed my life. I had taken chances no human being would ever take because I wanted to be somebody. I wanted to have something. If I was somebody, I mattered. If I was the kid that came from Cuba with no money like my dad, I was insignificant. And I would do anything to become that person, to become someone of power. But now I had it. So where do you go from here? You know, I was so sure that everything I had would make me happy, yet I was miserable. What was I willing to do to find that emptiness, that inner sense of corruption that would not leave me? What would it be like to go from a multi-millionaire not to have a dollar to buy a candy bar? Does life get immediately better once you change? You know, that's one thing that I really always criticize those televangelists. You know, telling people, listen, if you give money, you're going to be happy. You're going to have all this. You know, God doesn't work that way. Yeah, God might choose to do that. But what happens to those that do not? Then you know what happens? I remember one time speaking in a big event in Chicago, and I had this grandma came to me and she said, Dr. Valdes, you know, I just laid down in my bed and I just wanted to die until I heard you today. She said, the reason I wanted to die was because all I ever did all my life was pray that God would protect my 3 grandchildren. But you know what, Dr. Valdes? I lost all 3 of them to drive-by shootings. So what was I to determine? I finally realized that, hey, you know what? I'm so insignificant that God does not even listen to me. So if God does not listen to me and my grandchildren are dead, why just not die? You know, change sometimes happens immediately. Good things happen. Other times it doesn't. You're going to hear how my life went from worst to worst. There are questions that I would find answers to. Many of the answers, not what I ever expected. What would it be like to go from being a multi-millionaire, not to have a dollar, to buy a candy bar? You know, I would find those answers in the next episode. Once again, I want to thank you so much for tuning in to the Narco Mindset Podcast. If you like this episode, please share it, subscribe, and be part of our community. Remember, I will email a copy of my latest book, Narco Mindset, the Freedom Edition, to the first 3,000 subscribers. May God bless you, and see you again next episode.
We've come to the conclusion of this episode of the Narco Mindset Podcast, but your path towards hope, meaning, and redemption continues. For more information and resources to help you on your path towards finding a life built on integrity, honor, and truth, head to JorgeValdesPhD.com and join our community. We appreciate you joining us for this episode and look forward to helping you find your turning point right here on the Narco Mindset Podcast.